Hello, welcome class to Chapter 7, Administering a Secure Network. So today's objectives are to list and describe the functions of a secure network, explain the placement of security devices and technologies, tell how security data can be analyzed, and explain how to manage and secure network platforms. So, secure network protocols. So what are protocols? Protocols are just rules for communication. Essentially for proper communication between network devices. As I mentioned before, you should have taken a pre-advisory networking course before coming into CISS 310. Everything will be a lot more simpler, and I think between chapter 6 and 7, there's a lot of networking information. It goes very briefly into. Things might get a little confusing if you didn't have prior knowledge or exposure to it beforehand. So if you did not take a security networking course, please go on some of these terminologies, like make sure you really understand it, and you go Google and do some research on networking theories and topics, because networking is a huge part of security. You have to know how everything communicates and talks to each other. And, that leads into TCP/IP, Transmission and Control Protocol, and Internet Protocol. It's the most common protocol suite used for local area networks and the Internet. It comprises several protocols that all function together. So IP. IP is a layer 3 in the OSI model and provides network addresses and routing. The TCP, the transport layer, is a layer 4 protocol, establishes connections, ensure reliability, reliable data transport between devices. It also, breaks packets and puts them back together. It does, It does security checks and quality checks at that layer too, at that layer as well. TCP/IP uses a 4-layer architecture: network interface, internet, transport, and application. We are talking about the TCP/IP uses 4-layer architecture. So I think what they're trying to say here is there are two different architectures. We're going to be talking about the OSI model and the TCP/IP. When we're talking about the TCP/IP, there's a network interface, internet, transport, and application, versus the OSI, open systems interconnection model. So as you can see here, the OSI model has 7 layers. The TCP/IP model has 4 layers. All kind of does the only 2 things that are the same are the transport and network layers. In the TCP/IP model, the application and network interface, they aggregate a couple of the different layers in the OSI model. So several basic TCP/IP protocols that relate to security. SNMP, Simple Network Management Protocol. It's how network devices communicate and talk to each other. Domain name system, which is DNS. It resolves IP addresses to or domains to IP addresses, and IP addresses to domains if we're doing reverse. File transfer protocol, FTP. 135, 137, 139, and 445. Transfer protocol for transferring files. There are also email protocols that are not natively secure. Steps can be taken to protect email correspondence. That's not really helpful. Email protocols, we talk about SMTP. SMTP is used to send emails, which is on port 25. To receive emails, you can either use IMAP or POP. 3 POP is on port 110. INMP, IMP is IMAP. Sorry, IMAP is on port 143. The difference is IMAP, the email stays on the server and it synchronizes between all devices, and POP it actually gets downloaded onto your host and you can use it offline, but it's deleted off the server. And there are different pros and cons to each one. So SNMP, used to manage network equipment and is supported by most network equipment manufacturers, allows administrators to remotely monitor, manage, and configure network devices, functions by exchanging management information between network devices. Each SNMP managed device has an agent or a service, listens for and executes commands. So agents are password protected. Password is known as community string. Security vulnerabilities were present in SMNP version 1 and 2. Versions 3 uses usernames and passwords along with encryption to address vulnerabilities. So SNMP usually, even though it's the protocol that's being used, SNMP is also used to monitor network devices. Oh, I think, yeah, it's here, monitor network devices, right? So you want to put, the way we monitor network devices is we put out SNMP traps, which, it's a threshold or logic trigger, which if it meets a specific condition, it'll alert us. And that's how we usually monitor network devices. So DNS, a TCP IP protocol that maps IP addresses to their symbolic name or domains, the domain name. The DNS database is organized as hierarchy. Database consists of the name of a site and a corresponding IP address. The database is distributed to many different servers on the internet to prevent bottleneck and to ensure efficiency. So DNS, you can either have a DNS server or a local host. So DNS, usually the default or the first, if you want to reach out to the internet, usually your host will look at the local host file on your computer. There are IP addresses or domains that domains that map out to IP addresses, and it'll look through that host file first to map to that IP or know what IP address to go to. Now, if it's not in your local host file, it'll go out to a DNS server either internally or externally, however your organization is set up. And through that, then you will be able to figure out what the IP address is of that domain. We use DNS because it's hard to remember IP addresses. Like, if I told you the IP address of losrios.edu, would you be able to remember that? It's hard. It's hard to it's pretty much for the user, I guess. Ease of being able to get to the sites or look resources that they need to. So here we talk about, it said hierarchy, right? The way the way DNS works is based off hierarchy. So it starts actually from the right and goes all the way to the left. So with each dot, we call that a subdomain, and then if there's a / at the end of the root domain, then that's a subdirectory. So as we can see here, if we have www.nashville.com, we want to know what IP address this is so we can actually go to it, right? The root domain is .com, right? And so as I mentioned, it's hierarchy. We start from the right and go all the way to the left. So first, we go to our DNS server and we request, hey, what is, the IP address of .com? And so what happens is, that your DNS server will look up that IP address of .com, right? And then it'll send it, and that server will send it back, right? And then next, it'll look up, what's the IP address of Nashville, which is the second level of the URL. I'll find the IP address of, Nashville. And then you ask Nashville, now that you have this IP address, now you go back and say, hey, what's the IP address of www.nashville.com? And then you go to this DNS server, which will have the full URL, and it'll give you that IP address, which is 158.24.3.9, and then it'll go back to your DNS server and give it back to your computer. So it's pretty much a lookup. It says, hey, you ask your DNS server, hey, I need to get here. Okay, your DNS server will say, ask the .com server, say, hey, where's the next hop? Or where can I find Nashville? Okay, so, or where can I find this, URL? So I'll go to Nashville. I'll give you the IP of where you can find Nashville. All right, give me the IP of Nashville. Goes back, and that's how it works. So DNS is often the focus of attacks. DNS poisoning substitutes fraudulent IP addresses and can be done on the local host table, the local file I told you about, because that's usually done, because computers usually look at that first before going out to a DNS server. Can be thwarted by using DNSSEC. DNSSEC adds additional resource records and message header information, which can be used to verify the requested data has not been altered in transmission. So DNSSEC is essentially when you're requesting or doing a DNS lookup, it'll add resource records and message headers to ensure the integrity of the lookup while it's going through, the doc going through each of these subdomains, right? Attacker asks the valid DNS for a zone transfer. A zone transfer allows attacker access to network, hardware, and operating system information. So zone transfer is, kind of for replicating your DNS server for a different area. Or you can have, well, I'm not going to go into too detailed, but, you can have a primary zone. I highly recommend reading your book about this, zone transfers, because I can't go into detail just through these PowerPoint slides. So FTP, file transfer protocol. It's an unsecure protocol used to connect to an FTP server. FTP server, it's where you can host files or grab files. Methods for using FTP on local host computer from the command prompt, using a web browser, or using an FTP client like FileZilla or WinSCP. This one looks like WinSCP right here. So using FTP behind a firewall can present challenges. FTP has two ports, 21 and 20. So I take that back. I was thinking about SMB, not FTP, when we were talking about FTP here, file transfer protocol. I was talking about SMB. My bad. FTP active mode, client. So 21 is the FTP control part, and the 20 is the actual data port. So client's firewall may sometimes drop packets on port 20, the data channel connection. FTP passive, the client sends a passive command to the command channel, and the server responds with a TCP port to establish the data channel. So FTP vulnerabilities, it doesn't use encryption, and file transferred using FTP are vulnerable to man-in-the-middle attacks. I can grab it and see the data that's being transferred. So there's two different types of securing your FTP connections. There's FTPS, secure sockets layers, FTPS, which encrypts your data, uses SSL or TLS over FTP, over port 21 to encrypt your data. The thing is, it only encrypts port 21. It does not encrypt the data port itself. It just encrypts the control part. And then secure FTP uses only a single TCP port instead of two ports. All data and commands are encrypted. So let me explain this in a little more detail. So FTP, it uses two ports essentially, port 21 and port 20 when it wants to do communication. So port 21 is the control part. So when it wants to create that communication channel or wants to actually start sending and receiving, it will use port 21 to make that communication channel. And then once it makes that communication and authenticates, then it uses port 20 to actually send that data. So it uses two ports. Now FTPS, so now FTPS, it actually still has those two ports. It just encrypts some of the so it encrypts the command or the control portion, but the data port is not always encrypted, and that causes an issue. It's sent in like human readable format. And also, since two ports are open, usually there's been a history of causing issues on the firewall. Even though FTPS is technically SSL over FTP, and it's encrypting commands sent over the control port, it still has its own weaknesses. Now, secure FTP, most of the industry is moving towards SFTP or has SFTP implemented because two specific reasons: uses one single TCP port instead of two ports, and everything's aggregated together, right? All the communication, all the data that's being sent, one port, and it's encrypted. So secure email. So we have SMIME, Secure Multi-Purpose Internet Mail Extensions. It's a protocol for securing email messages. SMIME has limitations, cannot be used when mail is accessed through a web browser instead of a dedicated email application. Because SMIME encrypts the entire message, this makes it difficult for any third-party tool that inspects email for malware, because it also would be encrypted. So some enterprises and government agencies automate encrypting and decrypting email using a mail gateway appliance. Using secure network protocols. So right here we just have a list of all the secure protocols that they recommend. For time synchronations, use NTP. For voice, use SRTP, secure real-time transport protocol. We have web browsing. Web browsing, you're going to use HTTP over TLS, which then is HTTPS. And as we mentioned, email, SMIME. So placement of security devices and technologies. So the protection that security devices provide can be easily negated if those devices are not properly located in network architecture. So SSL TLS accelerator is a separate hardware card that inserts into a web server that contains coprocessors to handle SSL and TLS processing. SSL TLS hardware module can be installed as a virtual SSL TLS server alongside the forward proxy. So port mirrors allows the administrator to configure a switch to copy traffic that occurs on some or all ports to a designated port on the switch. Essentially what that means is you have a port, anything that's going through it, it's also mimicking to that specific port that you mirrored. So network tap is a test access point, a device that can monitor traffic. So port mirrors, use for port mirror, one of the uses are if you're trying to capture network traffic, you might port mirror a specific port that if you want to actually like physically capture network traffic, you'll take the specific port you want to look at, and you'll port mirror that. When you create a port mirror, everything that port mirror that was created, you connect that with whatever external device where you want to actually capture all that data on. So port mirroring, network analyzer, right? Internet comes to the switch. You port mirror to your network analyzer, even though all your traffic is going from internet to the network. And the network tap, it's pretty much something. So pretty much it's a device that watches the network, right? So sensors, collectors, and filters should be placed where the stream of data is the largest. So sensors monitor traffic for network intrusion detection and prevention devices. Remember IDS, IPS. Collectors gather traffic for SIMs. So remember the SIM is a place where you point all your logs to a SIM is a appliance or a tool. It can be cloud-based, where you point all your logs from your devices, your hosts, your different appliances that you actually have. You point all your logs to the SIM, or you create a data connector to the SIM, and your logs all come into a single pane of glass, and that allows you to do analyze and troubleshoot and correlate logs together, and specifically used for incident response. And then there's filters, block traffic for internet content filters. Usually you with modern firewalls, usually next gen firewalls, you have your filters on your firewalls. So aggregation switch, used to combine multiple network connections into a single link, should be located between routers and servers where they can detect and stop directed at a server or application. Correlation engine aggregates and correlates content from different sources to uncover an attack. Should be in the protected internal network using data collected from the logs of different hardware devices. DDoS mitigator, a hardware device that identifies and blocks real-time distributed denial of service attacks, should be in the network where they can monitor the largest stream of data. So to prevent from your availability of your network going down. So security logs can reveal types of attacks that are being directed at the network. So these are different types of logs, right? Security logs can reveal types of attacks that are being directed to the network, And if they were successful, access logs, who was able to get into provide details regarding requests for specific files, right? Who was able to get in, who got blocked. Audit logs used to record which user performed an action, whether it was read, modify, what's it? It's CRUM, right? Create, read, update, or modify. CRUD, yeah. Create, read, update, delete. Event logs pretty much document any successful or unsuccessful event. Usually, you can just type in event logs on a Windows Server box, and there's a bunch of event IDs. For example, event. If I'm not mistaken, it is. Yes, it's 4624 for. So if you're, for example, event logs, if you want to see if someone was able to successfully authenticate to a specific, their computer or a different resource, you can go into the event logs and look for a event ID of 4624, which is Windows Event ID and Windows Event Viewer for successful login attempts. A routine review of logs helps to identify security incidences, policy violations, fraudulent activities, operational problems. So, when we're talking about routine, review of logs, this is not only you should be reviewing your, technology-based logs, but also, your physical access logs as well. If I know for the state, I think it's at least recommended once a month you should be reviewing your data access logs, or who was able to get into the data center or whatnot, or who got in. And then also just being able to audit and review your logs, making sure that everything's captured and ensuring that there's no suspicious activity. I mean, it's definitely hard to operationalize security, especially with limited resources, but it's definitely something that you need to consider. And as you develop and mature your security program, that's when you can actually start integrating log reviews. It's a little more difficult when your security program, or you don't have many people or employees to help implement and operationalize security, because there's so much stuff that there's a lot of things that security comes into play with, and reviewing logs kind of gets thrown into the back burner and people forget. But it's really important just to be able to glance over and review to see suspicious activities. Usually nowadays, a lot of the technologies out there are a little more advanced, and they can help you out and send an email saying, hey, look at this specific activity. But it's important to at least review it. And they're useful performing auditing analysis, supporting the organization, internal investigations, identifying operational trends and long-term problems. I mean, reviewing logs, you can nowadays, everything, if you're scanning your badge to get into a room, or if you're trying to figure out who accessed which computer, logs are the way you'll be able to provide documentation and show pretty much facts that the organization is complying with laws and regulation requirements. Data from security devices. Almost every hardware device designed for security can generate logs. Firewall log items to be examined are IP addresses. So when you're reviewing a firewall, some of the things to look at when you're reviewing the logs is IP addresses rejected and dropped. That's actually a good KPI or key performance indicator to also be recording how many packets were dropped for a specific for example over the course of an hour or day. Sees how much traffic how much you're getting attacked, right? Probes to review firewall log, to review the probes to ports that have no application services on them, source routed packets, suspicious outbound connections. If someone's using a different DNS server or connecting via port 53, for example, if you see an outbound connection via port 53 and you have an internal DNS server, that's kind of suspicious. So you want to be careful on that. And then unsuccessful logins. So security software can produce important data that can be analyzed. Data execution prevention, DEP, a Windows feature that prevents attackers from using buffer overflow to execute malware. DEP events and those from similar software can be logged along with the level of severity. So file integrity check, FIC, a service that can monitor any changes made to the computer files, such as operating system files, or registry keys, right? These changes can compromise the security and how the computer is set up, and can indicate a breach. So data from security tools, application whitelisting. The most recommended way of providing security is to block everything by default and then whitelist only the specific things that you need. I mean, obviously it depends on your business. Sometimes you can't really do that, but for example, application whitelisting is you block all applications that can be like downloaded or used, and then only whitelist the specifics. Like you can only have Adobe, you can only have Microsoft Word on your computer. Removable media, remember, removable media control is a tool that can be used to restrict which removable media can be attached to a system. So nowadays it's mostly with your antivirus or a DLP software that or a management system that you can use to take care of removable media. And then you can use a NAC to prevent people from a NAC or to prevent people from getting on your network. And advanced malware management, often third-party service, advanced malware management tools monitor a network for any unusual activity. Issues in analyzing security data. So there are issues with log management, generating, transmitting, storing, analyzing, and disposing of computer security log data. This is due to multiple devices generating logs, very large volume of data, different log formats. So a solution to all this is use a central device log analyzer, and that's a SIM. Usually, you bring all your logs in together. It gets rid of your duplicates, puts everything in the same format so you can correlate everything together and troubleshoot or do incident response. Some applications and platforms require special security considerations: virtualization, cloud computing, software-defined networking, right? Virtualization, it then allows you to be able to have the availability to move freely and use that resource wherever you need to. Usually, so for example, all your net labs are actually virtual machines, right? Virtual machines just a simulated software-based emulation of a computer. Your Security Onion, your Kali Linux, that's all simulated. The host system runs a hypervisor that manages the virtual operating systems and supports one or more guest systems. The VM Monitor program is called Hypervisor, manages the VM operating systems. There's two types of hypervisors. Type 1 runs directly on the computer's hardware instead of the underlying operating system. Type 2 runs on the host operating system, much like an application. So as you can see here, type 1 hypervisor runs on the hardware. Type 2 runs on the operating system. So virtualization, so container application cell. Essentially what containers are is that you have one operating system which and then it has containers which you can run different applications on, right? So holds, and all those applications are using essentially one kernel. The only problem is if that one kernel gets compromised, all your applications get hurt. It holds only the necessary operating system components that are needed for the specific application to run. It reduces the necessary hard drive, storage space, and RAM, so everything's being shared essentially, and allows for containers to start more quickly because the operating system does not have to be started. So virtual desktop infrastructure, VDI, it's the process of running a user desktop inside a VM that resides on a server. So it enables personalized desktops for each user to be available on any computer or device that can access the server. Allows centralized management of all virtual desktops. So VDI is very popular. I know if you log in to a computer with your login credentials to usually pretty much almost all colleges now, it's essentially VDI, right? You log in, you're on your own net, you're on your own personalized desktop. I wouldn't say actually all colleges, but most of them, I guess. And then, this VDI essentially helps with, it allows you to be mobile. You can go on, it doesn't limit you to one specific, to be physically at one specific area, right? You can hop from one place to another, and it allows centralized management of all virtual desktops. So, there's a management client which creates those images for VDI, and you just have to go to that central management portal to back something up or create a new user desktop. VDE, Virtual Distributed Ethernet, an Ethernet compliant virtual network that can connect physically computers and or virtual machines together. So virtualization advantages: new virtual server machines can be made available, host availability and resources can be expanded or contracted as needed. Host elasticity can reduce costs, fewer physical computers must be purchased and maintained, can provide uninterrupted server access to users, supports live migration, which allows a virtual machine to be moved to a different physical computer with no impact to the user. So security related advantages of virtualization: test latest security updates. You can get a snapshot of a particular state of a virtual machine and be saved. For example, if you need to make an update, you have that snapshot and you can always bring it back if something goes wrong. So testing and exiting security configuration can be performed using a simulated network environment. A suspicious program can be loaded into an isolated virtual machine and executed for sandboxing. So if you have like malware and you want to see what it does, you just upload it into a VM, and you can have that run and do some reverse engineering on it or see if it's actually malware, and only the virtual machine will be impacted, so it's sandboxed in, right? Security concerns for virtualized environments. So not all hypervisors have the necessary security controls to keep out attackers. So if it actually you do get breached and they take over your hypervisor, everything is going to be compromised. Existing security tools were designed for single physical servers. VMs must be protected from both outside networks and other VMs on the same physical computer. VMs may be able to escape from the contained environment and directly interact with the host operating system. Important to have virtual machine escape protection. And then virtual machine sprawl, the widespread proliferation of VMs without proper oversight or management. So you just have way too many VMs and they're not being managed. So cloud computing on-premise model. Enterprises in the past purchased all hardware and software necessary to run on-prem. That's when I say on-premise, right? You buy your servers, you put it on in your data center. If you have a data center, it's on-prem. Now hosted services, well, I was talking about AWS and Azure, it's called cloud computing. You have servers, storages, you put everything up there. Networking infrastructure are shared by multiple enterprises over a remote network connection. Cloud computing, a model for enabling convenient on-demand network access to a shared pool of configurable computing resources. It's a pay-per-use computing model. Customers pay for only the resources they need, so you can spin things up and spin things down as needed. So the types of cloud. There are essentially 4 different types of cloud models. Public, community, private, and hybrid. So essentially what public cloud model is that individual businesses share on-premise and access to the basic computer infrastructure provided by each cloud service provider. Each company shares the cloud service provider's infrastructure with other companies that have subscribed to that specific cloud, and it's usually pay as you go. Public clouds are usually based on massive hardware installations distributed in locations throughout the country or across the globe. They're highly cost-effective, and but the only main disadvantage of public clouds is that advanced security and privacy provisions are beyond their capabilities because you're just sharing that environment. In private cloud, essentially a business has access to infrastructure in the cloud that is not shared with anyone else. That specific infrastructure, it's just for you. The business typically deploys its own platforms and software applications on the cloud infrastructure. The business's infrastructure usually lies behind a firewall that is accessed through the company's internet over encrypted connections. Usually they have significant advantage of being able to provide enhanced levels of security, prevent data leakage, and ensure compliance to different regulations, including HIPAA, PCI, or and other regulatory regulations. The only disadvantage is that companies are responsible for managing their own infrastructure up there. So a community cloud is, or we'll talk about hybrid first. So a hybrid cloud is a company's cloud deployment. A company's cloud deployment is split between public and private cloud infrastructure. So essentially they have a section for just private, which only them themselves can access, and then they also have a section for in their cloud model where it's available to the public for anyone to be able to access their resources. Now hybrid, if we're talking about hybrid, that was hybrid. Now if we're talking about community clouds are it's a recent variation on the private model. in that businesses share infrastructure provided by the cloud service provider for software and development tools that are designed to meet community needs. So, in addition, each business has its own private cloud space that is built to meet security, privacy, and compliant needs that are common in the community. So essentially what it's saying is there's a cloud infrastructure, and businesses that deal with the same business kind of share that same infrastructure. And then there's 4 service models in cloud computing. The CISS, PaaS, IaaS, and SecaaS. So SaaS, software as a service, is a vendor provides access to the vendor's software application. Vendor provides access to the vendor's software applications running on a cloud infrastructure. So essentially, a SaaS solution, the vendor is providing the infrastructure, the hardware, the maintenance of the application, and the company is just using that software as a service. A platform consumer installs and runs their own specialized applications on the cloud computing network. So you're in the cloud and you have an application. You put your application on the cloud. You don't have to worry about the infrastructure portion of it. You just have to worry about managing your own application. Application. Now, infrastructure, vendor allows customer to deploy and run their own software, including operating system and applications. So essentially, you build out your own infrastructure. You build your own infrastructure within the cloud, right? You have your own, essentially building out your own data center. Now, security as a service, all security services are delivered from the cloud to the enterprise. Cloud computing security challenges. Well, one of the biggest issues is cloud providers must guarantee means to approve authorized users and deny imposters. So it's a big issue is authentication. Being able to ensure authentication is really important. That's why most places use some form of either multi-factor authentication or shared keys. And then transmission from the cloud must be protected. So another issue for security is you're having data going back up and forth to the internet and back, and it's being stored there, right? So not only is you have to ensure there's encryption or you're VPNing into there, your data is being encrypted, but also you're storing people's information up in the cloud, right? You have to protect the environment from attackers being able to get into it. And then additionally, the highest level of application availability and security must be maintained. So something that's important is availability, right? You need high availability so you can always access your services. So if your internet goes down, then you're not able to get into your environment or your application or whatever you are hosting in the cloud, then that hurts your organization and business as a whole. So there are security challenges. You just have to be careful. And then we're talking about, and then CASB, Cloud Access Broker. It's a set of software tools or services that reside between the enterprise on-premise infrastructure and the cloud provider's infrastructure. Acts as a gatekeeper. It ensures the security policies of the enterprises extend to its data in the cloud. Essentially, to summarize what it says, it looks at the data that's being transferred back and forth, and ensures that it's meeting your organization's policies, right? And just to reiterate, I don't know if I mentioned it. So infrastructure as a service, usually if you're talking about AWS or Azure, you're borrowing resources, you're borrowing servers, you're borrowing servers from, or purchasing resources to host your applications on those servers and infrastructure. That's when you pay as a service for IaaS, infrastructure as a service. I don't know if I went over that sufficiently. Okay, so software-defined network virtualizes parts of the physical network so that it can be more quickly and easily reconfigured, accomplished by separating the control plane from the data plane. If traffic needs to flow through the network, it receives permission from the SDN controller, which verifies the communication is permitted by network policy of the enterprise. Once approved, the SDN controller computes a route for the flow to take. It also adds an entry for the flow in each of the switches along the path. So SDNs can provide stronger protection, simplifies extending VLAN beyond the perimeter of the building, which can help secure data. An SDN can ensure that all network traffic is routed through the firewall and can help capture data for NIDs and NIPs. So essentially, chapter summary: TCP/IP, most common protocol. Protocols for transferring files is FTP, FTPS. The security, and SFTP, which is probably the suggested one to use. The correct placement of security devices is essential for protection. You use SSL, TLS accelerators to it can be separate hardware card or separate hardware module installed as a virtual SSL server. Monitoring traffic on switches can be done two ways, either port mirroring or install a network tap. A log is a record of an event that occurs, and a solution to a log management is to use a centralized device log analyzer like a SIM, and some application platforms require special security considerations specifically for virtualization, cloud, and SDN, which are all new technology. And by 2022, it seems like all cloud computing is breaches on cloud computing is all going to be 95% of all breaches for cloud and virtualization is going to be due to misconfiguration. So it's relatively a new field that we're all getting into, and we're all trying to figure out how to best secure the cloud, our infrastructure up there. And so if you guys want to learn more about cloud computing, I highly recommend and learn as much as you can, just because it's like the latest thing. If you have that on your resume, you'll be on par with a lot of job seekers are looking for people with a wide variety of knowledge. And if you know a lot about cloud environment, and you can display sufficient experience, or you've been able to mess around with virtual and cloud environments, cloud administrators are very important these days. So